You've heard of way too early top 25s. What about a way too early Big Noon Kickoff prediction list? All right, we are going to predict where Big Noon Kickoff is going to be each week of the college football season. Got this idea over from Flyover Sports, their Substack over there. They cover some Big Ten stuff and things like that. A lot of written content over there. So we don't really have a relationship with them or anything, but it was a good idea. They had their way too early top 25 weekly wish list for the Big Ten's three major TV windows. So they actually went over there and predicted all of them. Here, we're just going to predict Big Noon Kickoff because as much as fun as it would be to predict all of them, I'm not sure I could be totally accurate on those. I feel pretty confident in my accuracy on this one. So the way that you have to try and be accurate on this one is you have to kind of go through a little bit of the process of the annual draft that goes on. So the annual Big Ten TV draft, I guess you could call it, happens in late April, kind of early May every year after the Big Ten schedule is released. Could happen sooner this year. We'll see what happens. But at the end of the day, we won't really know about it until it actually goes on. So it's a virtual event, lasts about 8 hours long, and it's a lot like, the NFL draft. They have war rooms, they go through all this stuff, and what they do is they don't go through and draft games, they go through and draft weeks. And so they say we have priority 1 on week 8, and you can go through and say, well, we draft priority 2 on week 8. Whatever you want to do, this is how they distribute it out, and the goal is to distribute the high profile games to maximum viewership. And so when it comes time to select your game, then you would obviously have your week. You say, well, we have priority 1, about a week or 2 ahead of time. You say, this is the game that we have as our priority time in it. Really, the only time you don't get a week or 2 ahead of time is like week 1 through 3. You have to kind of lock that in before the season even starts. But like week 4 and stuff like that onward, you can kind of see, well, what's this team doing? How good are they? Because like last year, Penn State would have had a ton of Big Noon kickoffs if not for how they obviously went throughout the rest of the season. So Fox has the advantage in this. They have the top 3 overall picks. They have 5 of the first 11 picks in this one. So obviously they get a lot. And then CBS and NBC, they each get 3 of the top 11. They kind of alternate the higher slots as they continue to go. So the preparation, it's a lot like mock drafts. Imagine fantasy football draft, but only for TV networks. What they do is they go through, they analyze the marquee games on the schedule, where they're going to be, and obviously the weeks that have multiple marquee games on it work out. And Big Noon's not going to typically pick a week where the marquee game is at USC or anything like that. They're not going to ask for first priority that week because they're most likely not going to try to show that game on that time frame there. So overall, this 2023 media deal, it goes through 2029. This is how it's going to work the entire time. The expanded West Coast teams obviously made this a little bit different for Big Noon Kickoff and what they can do. But I'm going to go through and give you what I think the first 4 picks will be, and then we'll just go ahead and go down the list for the rest of them, because I think it's almost impossible to try and predict the rest of the draft outside of the first 4 picks for Big Noon Kickoff, because not only can they draft priority spots in each week, but there's also trades that happen as well. They can say, hey, we'll trade you this pick for, a pick later on, and you can get priority 2 this week that we just drafted, or something, something like that, or we can get priority 2 of this week that you just drafted, whatever goes on there to try and make it all work out. And again, it's kind of like mock draft of the first round. Like, you can mock draft the first round and get pretty close of the NFL draft. Outside of that, you're not going to be very close. Like, your best thing to do there is to be like, yeah, this guy's probably a second round pick, but I have no idea who we would go to, because you don't know what trades are going to happen. This is going to happen. It's all very interesting. So pick number 1, I think, for Fox for Big Noon Kickoff, obviously, is going to be Michigan, Ohio State. This is one of the most widely watched games, if not the most watched game every single season. It's the greatest rivalry in college football. I think it's the greatest rivalry in sport, but I know others would disagree. That's okay. But I think it's the greatest rivalry in all sport, at the very least in all of college football. I saw a list the other day that had Alabama, Auburn. Are people stupid? That is not anywhere near the rivalry. It doesn't have the history. It doesn't have the decision making. It doesn't have the implications that Ohio State and Michigan has had. It's like, you have to be a real SEC shill to think that Alabama Auburn is better than Ohio State, Michigan. Like, give me a break. Anyway, this one's going to be at Ohio State. I think Big Noon Kickoff is going to lock that in for sure. There's no way they don't pick week 13 priority 1 first and foremost. The next pick I think they'll take is week 7 priority 1, which is when you get Ohio State, Indiana. Now, this game and Ohio State, Michigan were the 2 most watched non-playoff games of 2025. There is a possibility that they might go with Penn State, like Michigan instead or something like that. But overall, I don't think so. I think that this Ohio State, Indiana one is going to be it. That Penn State, Michigan game is there as well. So like if either Ohio State or Indiana's not playing all that well, but it's so early on in the season, I highly doubt either of these teams is going to have more than 2 losses at most. I can't even imagine either of them has 2 losses at that point. Ohio State does have a rough schedule, but I don't think they'll have 2 losses. And even if they do have 2 losses at that point, Ohio State fans are insane and they're going to watch like crazy. So that's almost a given as well. And I think the third pick, this is probably the one where you have the most kind of decision making, because you could pick probably, I would say, two or three different games here. I think they're going to go with week 2 and go with Oklahoma, Michigan. Now, week 10 would also be an interesting choice because in that week you have Oregon, Ohio State. That game is at Ohio State this season. And then you also have Michigan State, Michigan that week. So week 10 is actually like a pretty nice week to have priority 1 over, because it's later on in the season. There's a couple different options that you can go for there, and a couple different options of what Big Noon Kickoff could go for. Michigan State and Michigan has been a night game the past few years, but that's nothing that they're like locked in on, and that's nothing the TV people seem to be locked in on. It just seemed to be the way that the drafting and the priority has worked out. Now, after that, that's where things get a little tricky, because I think the next 3 games that would probably get taken after that are either week 8 of Indiana, Michigan, week 10 of Oregon, Ohio State, or week 7 of Penn State, Michigan. I think Oregon and Ohio State's probably going to get taken by CBS. I can't imagine they don't take that one. And if they don't take it, I'm almost certain that NBC would take that. And I think Ohio State would be glad to have a night game at that point. So I think that's probably going to be the one that CBS takes, week 10, Oregon, Ohio State. And then I think NBC is probably going to take week 7 with Penn State, Michigan, to be able to have that be a night one. And then I think that they are going to be left with week 8, Indiana, Michigan. Now, maybe, NBC takes Indiana, Michigan instead, and they're set with week 7 of Penn State, Michigan. That could also happen too. But the next best game outside of those that you might have is probably week 9, Ohio State, USC, but that's going to be a CBS or an NBC game because it's at USC. Big Noon Kickoff's not going to take that one. They're not going to have a 9 a.m. kickoff over at USC. They'll do some different stuff like that, like in the Central Time Zone, but they're not going to do that to USC. All right, now from here, I'm just going to go week by week and kind of talk through the different options and who I think they'll take. Week 1, I think they're going to take Ball State, Ohio State. Ohio State is just a ratings king. They had 6 top 50 non-playoff games in 2025, like top 50 games that were not playoff games in 2025. That was the most in the Big Ten. The team that had the next most was Indiana with 3. So it's possible they take North Texas, Indiana in that situation, but I think here you're going to see Ball State, Ohio State. Week 2, we already talked about that one, Oklahoma, Michigan. Week 3, you got a few different options here of who they could take. You have USC, Rutgers, maybe take that one. Purdue, UCLA, I don't think so. Again, UCLA on the West Coast. That honestly might be more of a Big Ten network game or something like that. And then Ohio State, Kent State. I don't think if they're going to do week 1 Ohio State, they would go back to Ohio State again, especially when you have Virginia Tech, Maryland in week 3. I think that's the one they're going to go for. I think that their thought process of Virginia Tech might bring some more viewers with James Franklin, his first, big game of the year. I don't think it's actually a big game against Maryland there. Sorry, Maryland fans, but I do think it would be something that could be something they entertain a little bit. So we'll see what happens there. But I think week 3, Virginia Tech, Maryland is probably where they'll go. Week 4, I think it's going to be Illinois, Ohio State. That was a top 50 game last year. And even with Ohio State or with Illinois maybe not being as good this year, they're most likely going to be 3-0 going into that game. And so, Illinois going up against Ohio State, Illinois is undefeated. I think you get some good stuff there. Week 5, I actually think this is where they go to the Big 12. They go Texas Tech, Colorado. Now, if you've watched Big Noon Kickoff, Joel Klatt, he likes to get himself to a Colorado game at least once a year. And Texas Tech going to Colorado, You look at the ones that are around this one: Indiana, Rutgers, Michigan, Minnesota. I don't think they'll get Ohio State, Iowa, unless they really prioritize that game, but I don't think they're going to prioritize that game over some other ones. And so I think this will be one where they decide to go to the Big 12 and do Texas Tech, Colorado, and kind of just maybe punt on week 5 and let NBC and CBS kind of have their picks in that one. Next week, week 6, USC, Penn State. That's likely going to be the whiteout, I think. Either that one or the Washington game, but I think the USC one's more likely. So I think in this one, you're going to see Indiana, Nebraska be where Big Noon Kickoff goes here. Nebraska, obviously, big brand, a lot of viewership. Indiana at this point, they would only have been on Big Noon Kickoff. They wouldn't have been on Big Noon Kickoff yet at this point. So I think week 6 there, unless they go with week 5, Indiana, Rutgers, but I don't think they'll do that. I think they'll go Indiana, Nebraska there. Week 7, we talked about. Week 8, we talked about. Week 7 was the third pick. Week 8, we think Indiana, Michigan is Ohio State, Indiana's week 7. Week 8, we think Indiana, Michigan, where they'll go. So we skip ahead to week 9. And week 9 has some interesting ones. This might be one where they go to the Big 12, but you also have Wisconsin, Iowa in week 9. You also have Minnesota, Indiana, and Washington and Nebraska. I think Wisconsin, Iowa is going to be the one here. You can't take Ohio State and Indiana every single time. You just can't, because they do have to have their obligations to Big Ten Network as well. They have to be on Big Ten Network at least twice throughout the season. And so if there was a week to not really look at it here for this one, probably thinking that you go Wisconsin, Iowa here, especially week 9 there. Ohio State on the bye, Indiana going up against Minnesota there at home. Maybe they'll go there, but I have a feeling this is the one where they go Wisconsin, Iowa in this situation. Week 10, you have Oregon, Ohio State in this one, but like I said, I think that's probably going to go to CBS, maybe NBC. So I think Big Noon Kickoff in this one. I actually think they're going to take the Michigan State game away from the night kick. And maybe NBC snags it. Maybe they've been really happy with it and they snag it. If they do, Washington, Penn State is probably where they go in this one. But I think that Michigan State and Michigan is probably where they're going to go here. Michigan is really good for ratings. Even on down years, they're really good for ratings for Big Noon Kickoff. And I think they'll go there in that one. Week 11, USC, Indiana. I think that's going to be a big game. I think that's where they're going to go. I think that Fox will prioritize picking that one as well. You also have Northwestern, Ohio State. I don't think they'll go there. And then you have Michigan, Oregon. I think that's likely an NBC type of game to go out there in that one in week 11. And then finally, since week 13 is the Michigan, Ohio State game there. Because there's no week 14 this time because there's no double buys. Week 12, I think Indiana, Washington is going to be an NBC game. They could go Ohio State, Nebraska. And honestly, it probably just depend on the picking order of what they do. But if Fox prioritizes the weeks, I think they'll prioritize. I think they'll have to go with Oregon, Michigan State in this one. Now, maybe they don't. Maybe they get Ohio State, Nebraska, but my pick is going to be Oregon, Michigan State in this one. And then, of course, like I said, to end the season, Ohio State or Michigan at Ohio State to end the year. Let me know your thoughts. These are my thoughts on where Big Noon Kickoff could possibly go throughout the season. Just to give it to you one more time, and then we'll move on. After this, week 1, Ball State, Ohio State. Week 2, Oklahoma, Michigan. Week 3, Virginia Tech, Maryland. Week 4, Illinois, Ohio State. Week 5, Texas Tech, Colorado. Week 6, Indiana, Nebraska. Week 7, Ohio State, Indiana. Week 8, Indiana, Michigan. Week 9, Wisconsin, Iowa. Week 10, Michigan State, Michigan. Week 11, USC, Indiana. Week 12, Oregon, Michigan State, and week 13, Michigan, Ohio State. Let me know your thoughts down below. Would love to get your thoughts and what you think, where you think that the Big Ten will be at, where the Big Noon Kickoff will be at each and every week. Do you like these selections? Do you not? Let me know.